Hello, everyone, and welcome into the Boobie Sports Show. I'm your host, Jonathan Messer. This is episode 3, and I'm excited to get this going. Today, on the list of things to do, we're going to pick Texas, Ohio State, Alabama, FSU, LSU, Clemson, and our Sunday game, Notre Dame, Miami. We're going to talk a little bit about the Micah Parsons trade, very briefly, give a brief USF Boise State recap, not much of a game, talk a little bit about Nebraska, and I'll be debuting a new segment called Boobie's Best Bets, hopefully earn you guys a little bit of money. When we get into the show today, forgive the voice a little bit, got some allergy stuff going on, typical human being things, but I don't want to make this show too long, so I want to jump right into it. And the first game we're going to pick is Texas, Ohio State. Spread here is moved down, and all these bets and lines that happens all the time. But as of right now, the line moved down to 1.5. Ohio State favored by 1.5. It was 2.5 just yesterday. So the lines moved. Money's come in. Ohio State money line is -11. Texas is -108. 3-point difference there on the money line, and the over-under is 46.5. So, my impact players in this game are Arch Manning for Texas offensively, Quintavion Wisner, 1,000-guy yard last year, and DJ Campbell is only returning guy back on the offensive line for Texas. For Ohio State, obviously Jeremiah Smith. I don't even need to explain why. James Peoples is a sophomore running back, kind of unproven, but a very talented guy. He was a 4-star out of last year's class. I think he'll make a big impact on the game. And Carnell Tate, other wide receiver. The reason I didn't say Julian Sain is because he's just a little more unproven to me than Arch Manning is. And I think Arch, if I had to take a guy right now, I'd take Arch. Impact players on defense for Texas, I have Colin Simmons, one of the best edge guys in the nation, Anthony Hill, one of the best linebackers in the nation, and Michael Taffy at free safety, one of the best safeties in the SEC. Moving on to Ohio State, a lot of the same. Caleb Downs is possibly the best college football player in the nation. Obvious reasons. The dude can cover the whole field. He can hit a lick on you, or he can take the ball out of the air. Elite talent there. Dude's going to go top 10 in the draft most likely. David Igbinosun, at corner, he was very inconsistent last year. I talked about this in my first rankings video, how inconsistent he was. He had very high highs and very low lows. He needs to be more consistent this year, and the reason I have him on here is because I think he will be. Bo Atkinson at edge. This is the dude who's not. I don't see him being technically a starter in quotations, but he'll take the bulk of the reps just because when you get a transfer in, so he transfers in from UNC, when you get a transfer in, most of the times they put their guys as the starter, kind of like Elijah Badger last year with Florida was technically not the starter, it was Khalil Jackson, but everyone knew who was going to be taking the most reps. It's going to be Bo Atkinson here at the edge position. Elite talent. Very good. I think he can shine at Ohio State better than he could UNC. Okay, let's get into a little bit of the weeds of the game. I have a few questions here and few matchups that I'm going to be looking for. One of these is Ohio State's elite receiver core versus Texas's elite secondary. In the playoffs, Sugar Bowl, Jeremiah Smith had 1 reception for 3 yards. Obviously, Carnell Tate 8. But a lot of their receiving game came from Travion Henderson's big screen pass. Also a few more receptions to him. And Quinshon Judkins through the passing game. So that's a question for me. A lot of guys are back from that Texas secondary. Malik Muhammad, Derek Williams is a 2 who's stepping up. Jalen Gilbo, starter at corner last year, he's back. Michael Taffy, obviously, as we mentioned before. But they also have a lot of depth. A lot of them are young guys, but a lot of depth. Jelani McDonald, Grayson Littleton, Xavier Flimsey, and also Kobe Black. Xavier was actually committed to Florida for a while and then flipped. But they have a very deep secondary, very experienced group. That's a very interesting matchup. But to add on to the receiving room for Ohio State, you have an elite tight end transfer, might be the best tight end in college football, in Max Clare. He carried Purdue's offense last year. So, how does he contribute to the receiving game? Also, Ohio State's unproven secondary to Texas' unproven receiving corps. So kind of a flip-flop here. Some of these teams at the top have a few of the same quote-unquote issues. I'd call them question marks. I think this is a Ryan Wingo game. I think Ryan Wingo goes off. I think he shows his five-star talent and shows why he was up there with Ryan Williams and Jeremiah Smith, respectively, in this game. Another matchup I'm looking for is Texas's edge guys versus Ohio State's unproven offensive line. Throwing in also Texas's linebackers in there because Texas likes to go, they like to send pressure, they like to send their backers, especially against a young quarterback such as Julian Sayin. Now, just because they're unproven on the offensive line, Ohio State, and they're a question mark, but they're not unbattled. Like they're a battle-tested group. A lot of these guys were twos last year who had to be plugged in and played, and they had a good offensive line rotation. So they're unproven but battle-tested. And then the same question for both teams. What is Julian saying? What is Arch Manning? I think both are going to be good, but if you had to tell me to take one now, I'd take Arch Manning. I think he's played more meaningful snaps, and what I've seen, I think he's a better quarterback as of right now. My next matchup in this game to look for is Texas' unproven but battle-tested offensive line versus Ohio State's unproven D-line. Texas has a lot of guys who have played kind of like Ohio State. And like I said before, a lot of these teams have the same question marks, and it comes from the same issues. Both of these teams recruit at a high level, so a lot of these guys were former 4- and 5-star guys. Ohio State has the issue on the defensive line. Texas has it on the offensive line. What I think helps here is how dynamic Texas's backfield is. You know, Cedric Baxter, Quintavion Wisner. I think that even if Ohio State's D-line has a good game, I think Texas's running game can get them out of trouble and can really help Arch. Compared to James Peoples as the running back for Ohio State, where does he settle down? Where does he implement his game into this game? I think he's going to have a good game, but I don't know how much pressure he can take off of Julian Sayin in big moments. So, let's get into my prediction. I think this is going to be a very close game. There are a lot of variables that go into this, but what it comes down to for me is I trust Arch Manning more, and I trust Texas's backfield to help out their young quarterback more than I trust Ohio State. So, I'm taking Texas to win in a close game. The way I see it happening is kind of like the Sugar Bowl, where it's a very close game. Say Ohio State's down by 4, and Julian Sayin it's 4th and 14 from their own 32, and Julian Sayin tries to force a ball because he has to, and Texas takes it back for a touchdown and wins the game by 11 points. Obviously, it's not it's on paper a 2-possession win, but it's not truly that. That's what I could see happening here. Like I said, it came down to Arch, me just believing in Arch a little bit more. I also believe that Texas' pass rush with Colin Simmons, and I think Anthony Hill comes in from the second level of the defense and wreaks havoc. I think Ohio State's offensive line will develop this year. They're just a young group, battle-tested but young group, and I think that shows in this game. So I got Texas winning outright, obviously covering the 1.5-point spread. Taking a sip of water here. Man, what a game that's going to be. If that doesn't get you excited, dude, week 1, we got a hell of a lineup. I read the games out, but even games I'm not going to predict. South Carolina, Virginia Tech in a neutral site game. Syracuse, Tennessee, neutral site game. I mean, games that we have. I'm filming this Friday afternoon. This should be out in the wee early hours of Saturday or maybe even Friday night. But tonight on Friday, TCU, UNC, obviously Baylor, Auburn. I gave my pick for that, and I'm not going to flip my position, obviously, because I do still think Baylor's going to win. But that game is so unpredictable. Some of these games in week 1, I really don't think there's much skill in predicting. Like Baylor and Auburn, I don't think there's much skill in predicting that game because the margins are so close. But I am still going to take my pick in Baylor. I think Baylor's going to win the game outright. Let's move along. Endpoint here. LSU goes to Clemson Death Valley. Not what we know in the SEC as Death Valley, but still a hostile atmosphere. What's the tale of this game? Well, it's 2 of the top 3 quarterbacks in the nation going against each other. You know, if you were to ask me my top 3 quarterbacks in the nation just right now, I'd give you Cade Klubnik, I'd give you Garrett Nussmeier, and I'd give you Drew Aller. 2 of these guys going head-to-head. Well, who's got the better supporting cast? Let's look at receivers. For Clemson, TJ Moore, Bryant Wesco, Antonio Williams. I know that some people don't really know the names as well, but that's the best receiving core in college football. I promise you. All 3 of those guys are going to be making plays on Sundays, and as a group, not as names, as a group, that's the best receiving core in college football. But LSU brings some guys to the table. Aaron Anderson is the highlighter out of that group. That's a guy. And what I think you see with LSU a little more on their receiving core is they got depth. You know, Chris Hilton, Xavion Thomas, Barryon Brown transfers in from Kentucky. Nick Anderson returns off injury, just transferred in from Oklahoma. Kyle Parker. Those are guys, all of those, who really stand out, but took a backseat role just because of how many guys they have. So, that's a very deep team. As far as running the ball, LSU was non-existent last year, and Clemson didn't have a very good run game outside of Cade Klubnik. I think Clemson's offensive line is much better than LSU's. LSU's offensive line really worries me. I'm really scared of that, especially when you let TJ Parker get going, Peter Woods, DeMonte Capehart. That scares me a lot. Will Helt even looks like a guy who's going to take a step. And then letting those guys eat that offensive line, when you have Wade Woodaz and Sammy Brown on your linebacking core, and then Avion Terrell, Ashton Hampton is one of the best cornerback duos, not just in the ACC, in the country. Khalil Barnes is back. Kylan Griffin, both back at safety. There's a very experienced team. Ohio State, on the other hand, I do like them up front. Jack Pyburn transfers in from Florida. You know what you got in him. He's not necessarily a dynamic pass rusher, but he's explosive. He can get to the quarterback. Bernard Goodson transfers in from USF. Dude's really, really good. Coming back, you got Patrick Payton off the outside, Dominique McKinley inside. You know, that's a good front seven. That front seven's so good that they felt comfortable moving Harold Perkins back to the star. Harold Perkins is going to be in coverage. Think about that. That's a dude who'll probably be all over the field. Mansour Delane transfers in the secondary from Virginia Tech, and I honestly think he's their best DB. I'm a little worried about this secondary, not necessarily because of the talent, but because of the short amount of time they've been together going into Death Valley and facing that good of a receiving core and that good of a quarterback with that good of an offensive line. Tamarcus Cooley, NC State transfer, is good. What's he going to be in the SEC? A.J. Halsey is one of those guys who's going to be good in whatever conference he plays in. Transfers in from Houston. That's just a good football player. Good football players play good football in good football conferences. All right, let's get into some of these matchups. Clemson's elite receiving core versus LSU's new secondary. Just a little bit like I was talking about. In my notes I have, will they be cohesive week one? LSU historically since after 2019 I should say, starts horrible in week one openers. What are they going to be in this game? Can they communicate? Because the secondary is probably on the field, except for offensive line, the position group you have to communicate the most about. Because if you're in cover two and you got a guy running a post, you got scissors concept on the outside, which is a post and a corner, but they kind of stack with their route, and then you got smash concept on the outside, which can either be a slot fade corner or a slot fade or a corner and then a hitch. Can you get that? Can you get the communication to make sure that you don't break on the wrong route, especially on the scissors route? Because somebody's going to have to make a decision. I hope I laid that out well enough. I kind of was a little all over the place. But for the people who really know the X's and O's, you'll know what I'm talking about. So, will that be right? Another matchup I'm really looking forward to is a really good LSU defensive line versus an elite Clemson offensive line. There's a difference between really good and elite. Clemson's offensive line is elite, but teams rise to the occasion. Sometimes players don't play as well. Can Clemson's offensive line lean on LSU's defensive line, or can LSU be so dynamic, athletic enough to stop up the run and get to Cade Klubnik? Make Cade Klubnik play off schedule, because he's a good improviser, but when he's off schedule, he makes mistakes. Can they do that? Can LSU sit in coverage and not fear Clemson's run game? Coming into this game, Clemson, Adam Randall, you got David Ezemame back there. I mean, those are all guys who we don't know really anything about. Can Clemson sit back in coverage? Can LSU sit back in coverage? Because if they can, the cohesiveness of that unit back there, the secondary, comes together like glue. Can LSU's offensive line hold up against Clemson's elite pass rush? Like I named before, Peter Woods, T.J. Parker, DeMonte Capehart, Will Helt. That's an elite pass rush. I don't think they can. I don't think they can at all. Can LSU run the ball? Take pressure off of Garrett Nussmeier, especially on third down. People like to point at Garrett Nussmeier and give him the turnover prone term. Put that on him. But when it's 3rd and 8 and 3rd and 12 all the time, of course the quarterback's going to try and force something. He's going to make some mistakes. I think if you give him more plays on schedule and you're in 3rd and short, 3rd and 3s, 3rd and 2s more often, the turnovers start to go away. Can that happen in this game? Well, let's get into a little bit of the game, the preview. The spread is Clemson minus 4.5. That number has risen. It was LSU minus 3.5. Money's come in on Clemson. Clemson minus 182. Money line, LSU plus 150, and the over-under is 57.5. Going into my impact players on offense for LSU, I got Garrett Nussmeier at quarterback, obviously, Aaron Anders at receiver, and Cade Durham at running back. Moving on to Clemson. Quarterback, I got Cade Klubnik, obviously, Bryant Wesco at receiver, and Antonio Williams at receiver. That's how good that receiving core. And honestly, if I didn't do just 3, I would have put TJ Moore there as my other impact player. Defensively, LSU moving Harold Perkins to the star position. He's still my most impactful player on their defense. Whit Weeks at linebacker. Whit and Wes Weeks is one of the best linebacking duos in college football, and to be able to do it with your brother is awesome. And then Mansour Delane, cornerback transfer from Virginia Tech. For Clemson, obviously T.J. Parker might be the best edge rusher in college football. Sammy Brown, him and Wade Woodaz together are a great linebacking duo, but I only had room for one of them, and I put Sammy Brown. And then Avion Terrell, great cornerback. It's one of the best cornerback duos on here with Ashton Hampton, but I had to pick one. If I had to take one, I'd take Avion Terrell. All right. If you can't tell, my pick is Clemson. I think this game's very highly contested, but I think Clemson pulls away. I think they win the game, and I think they probably close the game or ice the game with their last offensive drive. They probably score a touchdown while they're up by like 2 or 3 points to end, kind of like the Ohio State-Texas game. I think it ends up being a 2-possession game in quotes, but I think on the field it's really going to be a close game, 3 or 4 points. I don't think this game is, as you watch it, going to seem like anything more than a 1-possession football game. The reason I'm taking Clemson is because really they're more of a complete team. And they've been together for a while now, so they should be clicking early already into week 1. Now, my one contest to that is if LSU's offensive line plays well, LSU offensively can be effective enough to win this game. That's the key. What does the offensive line do? If the offensive line pass blocks well, Garrett Nussmeier can deliver the ball. If they can get to the second level off their duo blocks, off their double teams, can they get to the second level and block Wade Woodaz and Sammy Brown? If they can, and you get K. Durham going, you take some pressure off of Garrett Nussmeier. With that being said, I have Clemson to win and Clemson to cover. Man, I'm telling y'all, talking like this really takes an impact on, the mouth, your throat. Pause. Massive pause. But, yeah, I mean, another sip of water there. It does it. Talking emphatically, but you got to have some energy in this. Let's move on. We're going to predict Alabama versus FSU. All right. Endpoint here. Alabama goes to Florida State. Tallahassee. Revamped stadium. Louder. Took a few seats out. Maybe. We'll see. All right. What does FSU have on offense? Well, they got Thomas Castellanos. It was an imperfect marriage between him and O'Brien at Boston College. O'Brien brings in a pro system. Obviously he's been in the pros. That's not Castellanos. Castellanos wants to go around, run the ball, make plays, and O'Brien wants his quarterback to make passes and make plays with his arm. In a pro-style offense, you're really relying on your quarterback to make those zip-in passes, throw it into a window, and let's face it, that's not what Tommy is, okay? So, at running back, Roydell Williams, I really think could be a breakout guy here. He was really good at Alabama, got injured when he transferred in to FSU, didn't play last year. I think he can be big. But you got 4 new starters on the offensive line. That, like I said when talking about the LSU game, secondary and offensive line are the 2 units who have to be the most cohesive and have to communicate the best. And to have 4 new guys, now they're all redshirt seniors, but experience doesn't always equate to wins. On the defensive side of the ball, you need Darrell Jackson to step up, and I think he will. I think he'll be one of the best nose tackles, defensive linemen in the ACC this year. He's got to seal up the middle, and he's kind of got to do it on his own. James Williams has to get back to the passer. He transfers in from Nebraska with their DC. A JUCO guy originally. He's very explosive, a little bit of a liability in the run game. I hope that's something that he worked on, because if not, that can be an issue. You need some guys to step up in the linebacker room. I mean, you got some really good homegrown guys. Omar Graham got action last year. Justin Cryer got some action last year. They're both really promising athletic guys in the linebacker room. I think that'll be the untold story of FSU this year. I think their linebacker room's actually really good. Elijah Herring transfers in from Memphis, was originally at Tennessee. Can't cover worth a you know what. What's he going to be? that's a good run-stopping linebacker, but he's a liability in the passing game. And when you get a receiving core like Alabama, you're going to need your backers to play well in coverage. Jerry Wilson's a great transfer at safety from Houston, but can the twos in the secondary from last year for FSU step up? Last year, that secondary was pretty bad, and those guys were sitting behind those guys, but that doesn't always translate. You know, it's a whole thing with Arch Manning and Quinn Ewers. Well, if Quinn Ewers was better than Arch Manning last year, then there's no way Arch is that good because Quinn Ewers sucked. Well, first of all, Quinn Ewers didn't suck. Second of all, there's more things that go into that than just skill. So that's an interesting thing to watch. Alabama, you know what you got. Now, Jam Miller's out. Daniel Hill's going to take the bulk of the carries, but Dre Washington, it seems, has been the running back 2 there for a million years, and he's still going to be the running back 2 in this game. He's very battle-tested. Last year, he had 73 carries, 478 yards, and 5 touchdowns. But the story of this offense, in the run game at least, is how good this offensive line is. You got all 4 and 5 stars up front, except for one. You know, Caden Proctor's back. Just a ridiculous offensive line. The D-line is very talented. You're good in the trenches. Trust me, you're good. LT Overton, like I said before, I think is going to be the breakout edge rusher in the SEC this year, along with homeboy from South Carolina, Thomas Bryant. But I think LT Overton is going to be ridiculous this year. You got a lot of, like, this secondary. I'm going to just jump to the secondary because I've been wanting to talk about this forever. This is the best secondary in college football. You have the best safety duo in the SEC and Bray Hubbard and Keon Sabb, and you probably have the best cornerback duo in the SEC in Damani Jackson and Xavion Brown. And not to mention, these freshmen that you got in at corner, a lot of them are pushing for playing time. That is how good this secondary is. You're not going to be able to pass the ball against Alabama. Especially if LT Overton is as good as I think he's going to be, you're not going to be able to do it. I'm sorry, it's just not going to happen. James Smith is back at defensive line. He was a 2. He's probably going to be playing on the interior. He was a former 4-star. He was the 5th-ranked D lineman in the 2023 class. Tim Keenan's hurt, but if he comes back later in the season, you know what you got in him. So, and at linebacker, Deontay Lawson. This is why I picked them to win the national championship. They're too good. They're too good. That defense is ridiculous, and the team around Ty Simpson is too good. That is why I picked him to win the national championship. You look around, it's like he's got the Avengers by his side. I mean, just even think about the receiving core. Even like, say Ryan Williams doesn't exist. Jeremy Bernard had 800 yards last year as well. Isaiah Horton transfers in from Miami. Like, for whoever said Kalen DeBoer can't recruit the South, or he can't bring in anybody in the portal, can't acquire talent. My goodness, you look so stupid right now. Dumb as hell. All right, let's get into the weeds of this game, some of these matchups. My first thing is Thomas Castellanos versus the whole Alabama defense. If FSU wants to pull this game off, he has to play like it's a one-game season. Kind of like what Georgia Tech had done last year against FSU. That at that time, you know, perception of teams takes a big role into how the mental goes for each football team. Haynes King ran his ass off. If he want it could have been 2nd and 6, and he already has a 3-yard gain. He's gonna run for the extra yard every time. That's what Tommy Castellanos has to be in this game. He has to be a one-man wrecking crew, and Roydell Williams has to be there with them. They also have a really good tight end. It's gonna have to be a bunch of running around, dumping it to because as far as receivers go, other than Randy Pittman, obviously, as their tight end, Squirrel White transfers in. He's been a disappointment his whole career in Tennessee. It's a high-character guy. You like that, but he's been a disappointment. Gavin Blackwell transfers in from UNC. He's a redshirt senior, no real production there. Deuce Robinson is a good receiver. He's 6'6", 222. He had 23 receptions last year for 396 yards and 5 touchdowns. You need him to be better next year and take a step. Javon Boggs was a 4-star. He's a freshman. He's probably going to have to play a big role in this receiving room as well. This O-line for FSU, can they block for Roydell Williams? Because Roydell Williams can eat. Are they going to block for him? Alabama secondary versus a completely new, pretty much, FSU wide receiver room. Will they strap them up? I think they will. Guys, I can talk all the matchups I want. FSU doesn't stack up against Alabama, and I think this game's not very close. I'm going to just go into my predictions. I'm going to just go into my key players, talk a little bit about the matchup, but I don't think it's close. The spread is Alabama minus 13.5. I think they cover. This is one of my best bets. I'm going to release that segment. It is one of my best bets. It's Alabama minus 530 in the money line. Florida State plus 390. Over-unders 50.5. For FSU, my impact players are Deuce Robinson at receiver. New guy transfers in from USC. I got Roydell Williams at running back and Randy Pittman at tight end. Ryan Williams for Alabama at receiver. Caden Proctor is left tackle. Jeremy Bernard at receiver. Defensively, for Florida State, Darrell Jackson, I already talked about him. He's really good, but he can't do it by himself. James Williams coming off the edge, has to be better in the run game, but can get to the passer. And Jerry Wilson in the secondary. Okay, for Alabama, the dude I've been hyping up, LT Overton at edge, Deontay Lawson at linebacker, one of the best linebackers in the SEC, and Bray Hubbard probably is the best safety in the SEC. All right, as you can probably tell, my pick is Alabama, and I think they cover the spread. There is a path where this game is close. If Tommy Castellano is able to run around, make Alabama chase him, there's a game where this is close. The path for an upset here is there. Not a high percentage chance at all, but it's Tommy Castellanos running around and finding Randy Pittman and Roydell Williams in the flat. That's the path here. They have so much newness, and I don't believe in these unproven guys necessarily, at least in week one. Alabama, other than Ty Simpson, it's a lot of returning production, very experienced guys. That's what pulls them ahead here. I think Alabama supporting cast around Ty Simpson, I almost said Nick Saban, around Ty Simpson is better than FSU's around Thomas Castellanos. I think that's obvious. And I think Alabama goes into Doak and puts belt to BTA, let's say, BTA. Well, we're 3 picks in. I'm trying to get through this show pretty quick. I don't like to make these prediction segments longer than they have to do. On that last one, I was I repeated a little too much. Didn't need to do all that, but had to put some emphasis on it. Some emphasis. All right, we're going to move on. I already predicted. What am I talking about? Sorry. Notre Dame at Miami. We're going to go ahead and predict this game. Here's the end point. Notre Dame goes to Hard Rock Stadium. Will there be a crowd there? I hope so, because the Irish are coming in off a national championship appearance, and they're ready to get to work with a new quarterback, C.J. Carr. But they had the best running back duo in college football, perhaps. Jeremiah Love. I haven't said this actually yet, but I think he's going to win the Heisman. That's my Heisman winner, Jeremiah Smith. I think he's just too good. And then you get Jadarian Prince with him in the backfield. Just filthy. You need Jaden Greathouse to step up at receiver for you. He was their best receiver last year. But you also get Malachi Fields transferring in from Virginia. Dude's a stud. Just a really good football player. Reminds me let's see. It reminds me a lot of Jameson Williams. That would be my player comp for him at his time at Alabama. Offensive line is really good. You're only replacing 2 guys, and those 2 guys played really well. Notre Dame had some injuries on the offensive line last year, and they didn't skip a beat. That goes to show you how good that offensive line is. But what's CJ Carr here? Can they get him some completions early? Can they do that to help him get comfortable going in and win this game? Well, let's take a look at Miami's personnel and see if it equates to anything. Carson Beck transfers in from Georgia. What's he going to be? He was one of those guys that you thought, okay, he's going to take the step from really good to elite and be a Heisman Trophy candidate. Wrong. Some butt last year. Wasn't all his fault. That offensive line was uncharacteristically bad, had no type of running game, and they led the league in drops last year. So, that's not necessarily something he can help. Mark Fletcher is back at running back, 600 yards last year, 9 touchdowns. Really good. You thought Martinez was going to be the lead back, but he kind of took some of those carries. When I talk about question marks or unproven guys versus worrisome stuff, there's a difference. Well, with Miami, I'm worrisome about this receiving core. I'd look to JoJo Trader to be the main guy in this receiving core, but I'm nervous about it. Elijah Lofton's at tight end could be really good for you. On the defensive side of the ball, Akeem Messidor and Ruben Bain coming off the edge, that's a really good edge duo. I think if Miami wants to win this game, that's where it comes from. At linebacker, you got Mohamed Toure, Wesley Basante, good linebacking core. The secondary is very unproven, though. O.J. Frederique is the only one back. Now, the secondary was butt last year, but you also don't know what this group of guys is going to be. So, with that being said, we'll talk a little bit about Notre Dame's defense. Babacar Traore, I don't know how to pronounce his name, so my apologies. If you're looking at the name, you wouldn't either. But he's a guy we know. Not necessarily a household name, but it's a guy we know. He's up front on the edge. Really good. Jason Onye, he missed a lot of time last year because of a mental health injury. I don't necessarily know what that means, but he was really good while he was there. He needs to step up. Donovan Hennish, very good. He's on the inside. Shouldn't be able to get leaned on. Bryce Young needs to step up on the outside, though. Not quarterback Bryce Young edge rusher for Notre Dame. It's a young guy. I believe he's a sophomore or a redshirt sophomore. He needs to be big for them. Replace that production that's been lost. Now, this is where Notre Dame really shines. The linebacking core. Jalen Sneed is young but very, very talented, and Drake Bowen is one of the best linebackers in college football. Christian Gray and Leonard Moore is one of the best cornerback duos in college football. And then Adon Scholler is back at safety. He's really good. And Jalen Stroman is a guy that you probably remember from 2023 at Virginia Tech because he was one of the best safeties in college football. But he got hurt 24 snaps into his season last year. Can he get back to that point where he was the year prior? Can he be that good? I think he can. Okay, let's get into some of these matchups. Both of these teams are great up front. Who's going to give? Who's going to start leaning on the other? Notre Dame has a great offensive line, defensive line. Miami has a great offensive line, defensive line. Can Francis Moanoa's group for Miami up front lean on that Notre Dame defensive line? I guess time will tell. Can Miami's wide receiver core do anything against this elite Notre Dame secondary? Can Miami contain the run game? Now let's shift over a little bit to Notre Dame on offense. What's CJ Carr going to be? Can they get him some completions early to build that confidence? And can he fire against that unproven secondary of Miami? Unproven doesn't mean bad. So, what's that unproven secondary? If that secondary is really good for Miami, C.J. Carr could have some issues. How about this Notre Dame improved? We perceive it as improved, but this new receiving core, are they going to be good? Can they cook against Miami's secondary? A lot of this stuff does come down to that secondary for Miami, and also what happens up front in the trenches. Let's move on to a little bit of my impact players. The spread on this game. The spread on this game is Notre Dame, even though they're the visiting team, -2.5. Money line is Notre Dame -134, Miami +112, and the over/under is 50.5. Impact players on offense for Notre Dame. Obviously, Jeremiah Love, best running back in college football. Malachi Fields, UVA transfer at receiver. And I'm also going to put Jadarian Prince in here, just because he's that good. He would start on any other roster pretty much in college football. For Miami, Carson Beck, I think he's good. But him missing spring, how does it click? Does it click or is it flat? Obviously, Francis Moanoa at right tackle. I mean, you know he's might be the best offensive lineman in college football. Him and Caden Proctor, just a guy. And then Mark Fletcher at running back, talked about him, 600-yard guy last year, 9 touchdowns. He's coming back. Can he take stress off of Carson Beck with a unproven, worrisome receiving core? Defensively, Notre Dame, Drake Bowen, I talked about him, one of the best linebackers in college football. Christian Gray and Leonard Moore. Obviously, they have great safeties, but these two cornerbacks are really good, and I think if they match up and they take Miami's receivers out of the game, I think you can stack the box with a really good linebacking core and go after Carson Beck, number one, because you can man up on the outside, and number two, you can make sure Mark Fletcher doesn't get going on the run game, even though they have a great offensive line. For Miami, Ruben Bain is really, really good. O.J. Federico is really, really good. What I want to see is Wesley Basante take a step forward. These are all my impact players for Miami. Let's get into my pick. I got Notre Dame with the controlling win. Now, when I say controlling, I don't mean a blowout. I just think they control the game and they win handedly. Why I think this? Simply because they reload. Like, Notre Dame's just reloading. Their run game is really good. They can rely on it. And I think with a young quarterback in C.J. Carr, that really takes pressure off of him. He won't be as flustered during the game. He can see, even being, screens are an extension of the run game. That can also take pressure off a quarterback. It's an easy pass. Just toss it out there. Miami's defense, can the unknowns come through? That is their path to victory. Can Miami's unknowns in the secondary come through? Because if their secondary is as good as they think it is in-house, Miami could win this game, and they might win this game. But I'm taking Notre Dame to win and cover the spread. All right. So, got my predictions out of the way for our 4 biggest games. I'm going to take a sip of water. Hope y'all are having a wonderful day. Please, this is a good moment to say, please like, comment, and subscribe. It really does help grow the channel. This is something I really want to do into the future. And in order for that to happen, the channel needs to grow. I appreciate it a lot. Thank you for tuning in. Show's not over. We got a few more things just to touch on here. Two scores from last night that aren't necessarily going to get a segment, but we're going to talk about. Boise State gets mollywopped. Sorry if I hurt your ears there. I just had to say it. Absolutely mollywopped by USF. I knew I should have taken USF in this game. I should have went with my gut, but sometimes my gut has proven me wrong. So I went with Boise State, just a safe option. They look horrible. Ashton Jeanty was that team. That defense looks putrid, and Maddox Madsen played well, but they stalled out on every drive. I've never seen a team stall out like that before. Byron Brown is so good at USF. And, they go to Florida week 2. I'm not saying that's an upset. I'm just saying that game's going to be a lot closer. And depending on the spread, don't take Florida to cover. That defense is completely overhauled. They made that their goal, and they did it. What a game by USF. Nebraska let me down. I know people who had money on them to cover the spread, and they let those people down. They hurt those people. Hurt those people's pockets. 20-17 over Cincinnati. Obviously, we knew Sorsby was a really good quarterback for Cincinnati, a dude who can improvise and run. But every time it seemed like Nebraska was going to pull away, they didn't. They didn't keep their foot on the throttle, and they almost paid for it. Sorsby led Cincinnati down there on a really good drive. They were inside the 35-yard line. They were in field goal range, and they took a shot to win the game, and they threw a pick. Nebraska's secondary stepped up. Nebraska's defense looked good. It's just they started to get leaned on. Can't have that if they're going to be as good as I thought they were going to be. But it's a good thing you got the win. You start the season with the win, a non-con win. Hopefully that can build confidence and they can turn into the team that we think they were going to be. All right. New segment here. Boobie's best bets. I'm just gonna list them out. I'm actually let me take that back. I'm gonna name one, talk just briefly about it. I don't want this segment to be too long. Probably just 2 to 3 minutes. I am gonna make this a cut, but let's get into it. New segment. Boobie's best bets. Let's hope we can win you a little bit of money. Saturdays are a great day to gamble. Let's get you some money on these football games. All right. My first best bet, and none of these are really ranked, but my first best bet is Georgia Tech to cover -3.5 against Colorado. Colorado's losing a lot. Caden Salter transfers in there from Liberty, was not as good as we thought he was going to be last year. What is he going to be this year? Only time will tell. I like Haynes King. I like how physical Georgia Tech is. I like Justice Haynes. Jamal Haynes at running back for him, and I like how physical they are. They got a good defense. Bet Georgia Tech, lay the numbers. I like Bama -13.5 over FSU. We already talked about this game. I don't think I have to go into it much. It's just a complete mismatch. Tommy Castellanos is going to have to do stuff that we've never seen him do in order for them to even cover the spread. I don't think it happens. South Carolina in a neutral site game favored -7.5 against Virginia Tech. Virginia Tech lost a lot in the portal, lost everything in the portal, really. Kyron Drones is back at quarterback, but I don't think it's enough. I think South Carolina is going to be one of the best teams in college football this year. South Carolina wins this game. Lay the points. Also like Notre Dame -2.5 against Miami. Like I said, I've already talked about this game, but if Notre Dame's going to go in here and win, they're going to win by more than 2.5. I don't see it being a super close game. I think it'll be a contested game, but I think they win handedly. I think they control the game most of the game. They control the game most of the game. Yeah, I guess that's right. All right, moving on. Montana State +27.5 against Oregon. Montana State lost in the FCS National Championship last year. They got a really good quarterback. It's just a game where I think, Oregon started really slow last year. I think Dante Moore has a few hiccups, even though I think he's going to turn into one of the best quarterbacks in college football. And I think Montana State covers the spread. It's 27.5. I see Oregon winning this game by maybe 24 points or so, but I think Montana State covers. And possibly my favorite, Ball State to go into Purdue and cover the spread, 17.5. Purdue has some ridiculous number of new players. That team was horrible last year, and even though I think they'll be a little bit improved this year, in week 1, I think Ball State is a good enough program to go in there and cover the spread. I think Purdue wins this game by maybe 10 points. 7.5 less than the spread. My last best bet is Mississippi State minus 14.5 at home against Southern Miss. Southern Miss, not necessarily that Mississippi State is going to be a great team this year, but I think Jeff Levy has them in a good position to take a step, even though their schedule is ridiculous. I think they cover because I think Southern Miss having 51 new players, yes, 51 new players back. They have less than 15 guys returning on the whole roster. They have a whole new coaching staff. To go into the cowbell-ringing capital of the world and not get beat by 14.5 or less or more, I don't think it's going to happen. So I think Mississippi State covers that spread. That is Boobie's Best Bets. That will be a weekly segment. Let's win you some money. All right. Little break. Something you've heard a lot. Another sip of water. And we're just quickly going to dive into a little bit of NFL here. We're going to talk about Micah Parsons. It actually happened. Micah Parsons got traded. He signed a 4-year, $188 million contract with the Packers after being traded. The Packers traded Kenny Clark is a really good defensive tackle and also a 2026 and 2027 first-round pick. Micah Parsons, 3 years in the league, 3 All-Pros. He should have gotten Defensive Player of the Year his second year in the league. We're not going to talk about snubs, but he should have. He's an elite talent. Micah Parsons is a generational talent. You know, I don't like using that word that frequently, but he is that. He's a generational talent. And the Cowboys will not win a Super Bowl until Jerry Jones is gone. I've talked about it in the first episode. I'm a Washington Commanders fan, and I knew that Washington would never win a Super Bowl until Dan Snyder was gone. Now, Dan Snyder wasn't the GM, but he sure as hell acted like it because he went down and he drafted Dwayne Haskins. He traded 3 first-round picks for RG3 in 2012. He made decisions for that football team. He literally held Josh Norman hostage on a damn runway to make sure he signed. That's the vibes that Jerry Jones gives me, and that's the type of owner and GM that he is. He's bad. He doesn't know how to evaluate talent. He doesn't know how to evaluate a team's needs, and Dallas is not going to be anything until he's gone. I don't trust Dak Prescott. You bring in George Pickens, hothead of the NFL, but you can't re-sign your best franchise player since Emmitt Smith. Give me a break. I hate the fact that it's every year that we have to sit here and talk about Jerry Jones either not doing anything or doing something detrimental to the Cowboys. Cowboys fans don't deserve this. It's been enough. Jerry Jones, sell the team. He's not going to do it. He's going to die the Cowboys owner. And I never wish death upon anybody. Ever. And I'm not doing it for him, but I'm simply saying until he dies, the Cowboys are not going to win a Super Bowl. Trading Micah Parsons is the dumbest thing the Cowboys could have done. Next year, maybe you trade up for a quarterback, depending on how you finish. But now the Packers are gearing up for a Super Bowl run. And if you look at it, what was the Packers' biggest flaw? It was corner. They had to move a guy over from the offensive side of the ball. This ain't college we're talking about, NFL, and put him at corner. Well, now when you have Micah Parsons rushing the pass, it's not going to matter. He's not going to have to cover as long because Parsons is going to be in whoever's face it's throwing the ball. Packers are really gearing up for a Super Bowl run. Can Jordan Love be better? You know, you draft Matthew Golden. I think he's going to be really, really good. I wanted Washington to draft him. He wasn't there, obviously. If Jordan Love can be a good, sound quarterback, the Packers can make a run at the Super Bowl. Wow, just pathetic general manager decision from Jerry Jones, and what a pathetic general manager and owner he is. Sorry to end the show on a little hostile note, a little pissed off note, but it does. It makes me mad to see dumb decisions like that be made. But with that being said, I appreciate everyone watching. Please like, comment, subscribe. It really does help out the show. Let me know segments you want to see during the season or your opinions on my picks, even if you're like, hey, Jonathan, you're the biggest dumbass I've ever seen in my life. Maybe tonight Baylor and Auburn doesn't go my way. Comment, Jonathan, you're stupid. I already know somebody who's going to tell me that if Auburn wins tonight. But with that being said, thank you very much. Have a great weekend. Have a great week 1 of college football. Let's go, baby. It should be a holiday. We should get Friday and Monday off. But with that being said, thank you very much. I appreciate all the listening. God bless.